Good evening, friends and my fellow JJites. Last year, in 2019, during inception, my team had pledged that the Alumni Association of Sir J.J. College of Architecture shall be truly beneficial for professional and social excellence of its members and stakeholders. We made our mission to embolden, advance, and bolster close relations among the alumni. An alumnus association earns to be a fundamental link amongst the alumni across the globe to foster and strengthen deep-rooted, lifelong exploration and engagement of its members. Our vision is to position Sir J.J. College of Architecture as one of the most renowned and leading institutions, thereby bringing respect to all the alumni and stakeholders. A reverential, harmonious and unbiased collaboration that is embracing and engaging for alumni and its partners. To mentor and channelize scholarships for innovations and research to promote studies and research on various policies. Facilitating the promotion of alumni members at leadership positions across industries. To adopt digitized technologies and improvements that shall benchmark industrial expectations. To provide a colloquium for the alumni for exchange of ideas on academic, cultural and social issues by organizing reunion activities. To provide assorted benefits including networking, opportunities, special events, seminars and forums. To promote awareness of architecture and best practices of construction management. Alumni have consistently reverberated the learnings offered by the college, thus enabling the institute to undertake projects and initiatives that would otherwise have not been possible. Adopting appropriate public relations and branding strategies to promote the outstanding work contribution of alma mater, stakeholders and alumni members. Simplifying the election facilities for its members by introducing digitized election procedures is also on the cards. What was the way forward? Market participation, knowledge exchange collaborations with different universities and colleges, with practicing architects and allied professions, industry interactions, and most important, mentorship. I trust this movement finds all my loving AAJJA family in best of health in these challenging times of lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In continuation to the legacy of our alma mater and Alumni Association of Sir J.J. College of Architecture, we have invited many legends from the fraternity as master speakers on the forum of the knowledge sharing series starting from 15 May 2020 till 15 August 2020. These webinars will be broadcasted to open audience from fraternity with an objective of reinforcing the brand identity of our esteemed alma mater. This is the first time an Alumni Association of Architecture College is collectively doing something like this. Each talk will be accompanied by open mic where we can have heart-to-heart conversation and share our experiences. The format of the program is to ensure that the vast experience and knowledge sharing percolates to all the recipients from all walks of realm of our industry, from professionals to students, industry OEMs to contract specialists, etc. I'm glad to mention that iDAC is facilitating and supporting AAJJA by providing technical support for best outreach on the web and various social media platforms. I request you all to participate in the event and make this initiation a grand success. I would like to thank my team for their endless efforts and continuous enthusiasm. Many thanks to Architect Bobby Vijaykar, Architect Parish Kapse, Architect Vivek Bhole, Architect Naresh Shah, Architect Ashok Gangurde, Architect Trupti Puranik, Architect Swapnil Sawant, and our young architect Apeksha Kore. Once again, please accept our best wishes for safety of yourself and family. Stay home and stay safe.
Good evening all. Hope you and your family are safe and in good health. I am Apeksha Kore from Alumni Association, Sir J.J. College of Architecture. Addressing the knowledge series on behalf of President Architect Jiten Sethi and the Managing Committee, Architect Paresh Kapse, Architect Swapnil Sawant, Architect Vivek Bhole, Architect Bobby Vijaykar, Architect Ashok Gangurde, Architect Trupti Puranik, and Architect Naresh Shah. Today, we have two alumni professionals, Architect Virendra Kallianpur and Architect PURVI Dalal with us, who are contributing at large through their practices. Virendra Kallianpur is a practice leader for urban design an associate principal at Perkins&Will's Vancouver studio in Canada. He holds a Master's of Arts in Architecture from National University of Singapore, a Bachelor's in Architecture, honors Sir J.J. College of Architecture, University of Mumbai, alumnus since 1996. He is LEED and RELI accredited professional and a registered urban planner in the United States. With over 22 years of experience in architecture, urban design and planning, and having worked in multiple cities across Asia, Middle East, and North America, Viren has a broad perspective with a deep understanding of cities and built environments. Effectively oscillating between the scales of architecture, urban design, and urban planning, Viren brings rigor and robustness in the thinking of the built environment from buildings to cities. He embraces environmental consciousness and technology to elevate the design thinking to a higher level. Viren is passionate about sustainability and resilience, which has led him to effectively advance the strategies for institutions and influence the design thinking for public and private projects. From the master plans of large-scale townships, rejuvenation of brownfield sites, transit-oriented developments, downtown and waterfronts to large-scale mixed-use projects, Viren has gained a reputation of advancing a forward-thinking and performance-based approach in the design of cities. His innate ability to understand, resolve, create synergies, and converge the interests of various stakeholders has enabled him to effectively lead several large projects in both public and private sectors. Using a multi-layered approach and looking through multiple lenses, Viren strives to create sustainable and meaningful communities that are well integrated into the context. I hereby hand over to Viren, sharing with us a resilient, inclusive, sustainable, and equitable future of cities.
Hi, everyone. Cities are made up of multiple things, people, buildings, nature, and so on. But I think it's more important to think about the life. It's about actually celebrating life in cities. Think about cities. One can think about, when you think about cities in terms of design, you can think about, is it determination or is it evolution? And I would like to kind of start the whole topic today about these two aspects of it. Cities go through different acute shocks and chronic stresses. Cities are predicted to support 60% of the world population. At the same time, they need to also be net zero by 2030. So the whole point is that cities need to evolve and transform for what they are today. Now, the current Anthropocene era has resulted in really an urgent and critical necessity to understand and recalibrate the evolution of cities. I would like to propose that it's not possible to predetermine the future of a city, but in fact, it is more effective and successful to create a framework for the evolution of the city and set up conditions for success. Now, thinking about cities in terms of past, present, and future, let's look at a few cities, and I'll begin this discourse with Barcelona. It's the fifth most populous city in Europe, 1.6 million within the city limits, and around 4.8, 4.9 million in the greater region. Now, CERDA's original plan with 400 feet by 400 feet roughly blocks with 45-degree chamfered corners actually really served multiple things. It created better visibility. There was recreational and community spaces in the center. The built forms originally, if you look at the original plan, they were actually only on two sides to bring in maximum amount of sunlight and ventilation. However, it evolved and the perimeter was built up and recreational and courtyards in the center kind of disappeared. Now, fast forward, a few hundred years, now we are thinking about super blocks in Barcelona, combining 9 blocks, so roughly 1,300 square feet by 1,300 feet, with the intention that you'll keep the traffic in the perimeter and cars would be banned or restricted with low speed. and priority is given to walking and cycling when open space is reclaimed or created from parking. Now, the point to be made is that the way the city was designed, it enabled it to kind of evolve. And it was about actually really creating a good framework. So the next city that we'll talk about is New York. Now you know about the Manhattan street grid based on the commissioner's plan in 1811. Came into place, in fact, in response to the huge population growth that Manhattan saw in 1719 to 1810, roughly. It tripled, right? The population tripled. As a result, there was public health issues, and and therefore, we started thinking about what the city should be and the grid. So the grids actually, if you think about the way the grids work in cities, as all of you may already know, that it's actually a great wayfinding mechanism. In Manhattan, streets run east-west, kind of at an angle, and avenues run north-south. Now, the grid also enables buildings to be built and rebuilt, right? Replaced. And again, the whole point is creating a strong framework. As you can see, these buildings have kind of, some of them are still existing, some of them are kind of are being replaced. In the future, some of them will be replaced even more. So the whole point is that when you think about cities, like how do we actually create really strong and flexible frameworks where buildings can be built and taken down and rebuilt, so the building kind of survives and evolves just like a living organism. Now let's look at let's move to Asia and look at Singapore. Now, Singapore is perhaps one of the most progressive and well-managed city-states in the world, right? Really strategic planning, strict governance. They're really known for resilience planning. It has really helped Singapore to evolve from like a small fishing village to a bustling metropolis, leading research and development, finance, logistics, you name it. Now, the growth is actually managed and controlled, right? There are some cons. One may say, it's very strict. There are a lot of fines for everything. But things come with a price. There is some amount of discipline, and that has really helped Singapore to become a powerhouse. Now, again, when you think about evolution, that comes in direct correlation with really strong planning and thinking about what happens in the future. So it's about flexibility and about adaptability. The next city I think we can talk about is probably Dubai. Now, compared to cities like Barcelona, London, New York, and other cities, this is pretty a young city, one may say. The primary force that actually helped the establishment of Dubai as a city was actually the airport hub. It's in, I think it was in the 1980s, or yeah, I think around 1980s when the international airport was built, and actually that enabled people to travel, and soon actually it became a hub for London, Frankfurt, Singapore, and connections to the rest of the world. And it also became a business hub, which actually led to a huge surge of development, right? Including like artificial islands. Many of them, of course, some of them are sinking under the threat of sea level rise and so on and so forth. But I think we're not talking about that. But I think what we are talking about is about like the ambition and about the mega projects. Now, ambitions are great, aspirations are great, mega projects are great, but I think at the same time, what is the framework? What is the structure of the city? And that's the question, because I think right now the way cities like Dubai are evolving, it's becoming almost like the showroom of architectural showpiece. While at the same time it's interesting, but at the same time it's kind of scary for the evolution of the city. So, however, as you can see in the picture, it's largely automobile dependent, and there's a conscious effort to now increase the transit infrastructure, as many of you may know. So the point is the evolution of a city is again related back to the priorities you place and how things get evolved. How things get built over a period of time. Some of these, I would say, priorities has impacted cities in North America. The dependence on cities, like for example, LA, Detroit, you can name multiple cities, and it has left a huge negative impact. And cities like, for example, Dubai, and even a lot of cities in India are actually going on that path. So I think it's, as planners, as architects and urban designers, we really have to think about our priorities. So thinking about the future of cities, there's no crystal ball that is available for all of us. I think the past and present really informs the future, but does not need to necessarily dictate the future. There's a difference. You need to look at the rear view as a point of reference for what has happened in the past, but you definitely need to look forward and plan for your future. Now, again, I ask that question, are cities to be determined or evolved? Can cities be really designed to the extent of determination? I'd like to propose that the answer is a no. As designers, we can actually co-design the structure, the framework, build a strong skeleton on which muscles and organs can be built upon. We cannot be deterministic. We need to be visionary, definitely, and help to steer the evolution in the right direction. To help steer the evolution of cities in the right direction, we need to have strong, robust, and holistic approach. Before that, let's look at some of the approaches that have been taken before, some more effective than others. Planning for the future of the cities. Can we really predetermine the future of cities like, utopian cities such as, Frank Lloyd Wright's Broadacre City, Corbusier's Radiant City? While visionary for sure, they were based on a single strong hypothesis or standpoint, such as Frank Lloyd Wright's standard of measurement, man seated in his automobile, or a living machine efficiency, in terms of how Corbusier actually thought about spaces. Now, let's take the example of Chandigarh. Incredibly ordered, sectors, street hierarchies of the 7 V's that Corbusier talked about in harmonious proportions, using the human form, in all really fantastic things. But I think there were some concerns or issues that as historians have studied, and even people who have lived in the city have always thought about. And one of the big concern is the sense of livability and a lack of response to the climate. So like certain sectors like 17 sector and stuff like that, it's essentially a large hot boiling plate. You can't really walk and use the public space because of the way it's designed. Now, that may be a small portion of a city, but I think the point is that can cities be thought about as artifacts, or are they really a living organism which needs to evolve and adapt and be flexible? The other approach that you could think about is technological. And like if you think about in the 1900s when Henry Ford had his first Model T car, then the whole promise of if you live in the suburbs, you can have a big house, don't worry about living in the city, which is it's got like disease and outbreak and all of that. So there was a dream that was sold, and I think of course people subscribed to it. And what has resulted in the long term, over the last 100 years, is what you see. It's like traffic jams. There is a lot of congestion. Leads to long travel times. Pollution, stress, health issues, and so on and so forth. Now, think about what's happening now. With autonomous cars. Now, this is a next wave. Now, how do we actually ensure that we do not repeat our mistakes? We definitely need to embrace and leverage the technology, but we need to be really careful how it is deployed. What are the policies? to ensure that there is equity and mobility access to all. Now, how does it impact transit, for instance? What about vehicle miles traveled? There is research and data that shows that unless the policies are put in place, in fact, there'll be more vehicle miles traveled than less, as people often talk about. Now, this is a picture of Tel Aviv in Israel, but actually you can actually think about this in most of the cities in the world, even in some of the cities, big cities in India. The amount of infrastructure and physical space that cars use is amazing, and this is really true with, I would say, most of the North American cities. Now, again, we are thinking about in the future when autonomous cars come. What do we do? What are the policies that enable the cities to evolve in the right direction? The other way of looking at is, very singular or utopian. Now, this is Oceanic, which is designed or proposed by, Bjark Angels. And one aspect of this is, it's really visionary. It is proposed as a response to climate change, but as actually a huge risk, if you think about it, from causing more ecological, marine, and environmental issues. Now, it's very exciting because it's technological. The image itself is very, impressive. But let's take a step back and think about it. Should we expand a footprint beyond the land and invade the water now? Is this advisable from an ecological and resilience standpoint? And really think about all the negative points that can happen. For example, land reclamation and the impact on marine ecology, sea level rise, and so on and so forth. So not to sound alarming, but it's just the priorities we put in place. What are the different attributes we are thinking about when we evaluate the direction we move in the approach that we take? That's the question that I think we must think about. Now think about another approach towards cities. This is a futuristic approach. Now, the Belgian architect Louis created these really futuristic impressions of a street. Now, is the future defined by idiosyncratic or curvy buildings and UFOs, or is it about really creating a better environment for people and living beings? So if you look at the image on the far left, from the 1900s to the far right, 2100s, you will see the evolution of it. The streets were really complete streets. Everyone had the right to be there, whether it's people, pedestrian, bikes, horse carts, and so on and so forth. But if you look at the extreme right, people are raised up on top of the buildings. The streets are pretty much, dead. The architecture is very futuristic, but is that the kind of environment that we want to build? Should we think about people more than we think about cars and buildings and so on and so forth? How do we leverage the context? How do we actually create more livability? How do we animate? How do you celebrate life in itself? The other approach about thinking about city is this mega, like highly ambitious projects. Now, this is a project NEOM, which many of you may know. It's a huge project, 26,500 square kilometers, stretching over 3 countries, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan. A huge amount of investment. I think it was like in the order of like 500 billion investment, and it's backed by Saudi Arabia. Now, they're talking about really, fantastic inventions, including an artificial moon, total renewable energy, and a lot of technology that is put in. Really, really lofty goals, and it's fantastic, the kind of things that the human mind can can explore and think, and the technology that we are developing. But fundamentally, it is a green field. Now the question becomes, is it better to invest and increase the density in existing cities where there is transit, there are utilities, there's already economic and social structures, than create new ones, and thereby increasing sprawl, impacting the environment and so on and so forth? Let's think about that. The other, I would say it's almost a big movement that's happening is about smart cities and integrating cutting-edge technology tools and democratic governance, big data, Internet of Things, and sensors, and so on and so forth. This is Quayside in waterfront Toronto by Sidewalk Labs. Envisioned as an innovative neighborhood, and it really sets a new standard for urban life in the 21st century. Built entirely in mass timber, there are dynamic streets that adapt to neighborhoods' changing needs, whether it's weather mitigation, it's systems, it's thermal grid for heating and cooling, and there are over more than, I think, like 60 innovative ideas for public realm, buildings, energy, sustainability, social infrastructure, and digital innovation. However, unfortunately, on May 7th, just a few weeks back, Sidewalk Labs announced that they will no longer pursue this development due to economic uncertainty due to COVID-19. It was controversial to begin with in terms of concerns about collection and ownership of data, because it's all collected through sensors, and who owns it, and how it will be kind of used or misused and sold and stuff like that. There were also some economic concerns and intellectual ownership of the innovations. But all that set aside, it was quite holistic in the way they were thinking. So I think that's one approach that we can think about. But at the same time, we have to always balance. People come first. So we need to ensure that the policies are put in place that protect people. At the same time, we leverage technology. So it's about creating a balance between the two. Now, this is something that is on everyone's mind. What is the future of the cities? And National Geographic, and this is an issue in April 2019, National Geographic came up with this issue about ideas for a brighter future. In this issue, SOM actually proposed something that is really visionary. It was based on a lot of technology integration. It's about whether it's drones, supplying and providing logistics, or it was autonomous cars, or it's about hydrology, it was about renewable energy, and so on and so forth. It was pretty holistic. So I think there is, if you think about all the different aspects of cities, we have to start thinking about the complexity of it. And we will talk a little bit about this later in the talk. But just keep that in mind, that cities have multi-layers. They have multiple things that we have to think about, and how do we actually start thinking about those connections between cities. Now, if we really believe that we can influence the evolution of cities, what are the conditions of success? Like, how do we really define them? Cities have different disruptive forces that they need to respond to. I've picked up 5 of them. Let's start with climate emergency, which is one of the most critical issues that we are facing in cities all around the world. The second is Generation C, which is generation connected. Now, unlike all the other generations we talk about, from baby boomers or whether it's millennials, this is not necessarily age related. In fact, this is more a choice of lifestyle, a choice that you make. So whether you're 60 years old or you're 18-year-old youth, you can choose to be connected, and that's a way and an approach to live, work, or play. So essentially, it's about reinventing the way we work. So we don't necessarily have to be productive sitting at a desk and working. You can actually be in a park and work on your tablet or a laptop, and this is happening across the globe. The third element that I wanted to talk about is Industry 4.0. It's about automation. So whether it's autonomous cars or automation, machine learning, augmented reality or virtual reality, cloud computing, ambient intelligence. Essentially, how do we actually respond? Like, how do cities respond to this new industry? The fourth element is cities will lead, nations will follow. Now, back in the day, cities were actually bound by the countries they were part of. Now, cities are actually leading the way. There is a whole council of mayors. They are connected. You have sister cities, and they are in fact far more progressive than the countries they belong to. The last one I would like to propose is about what you are is more important than where you are. What essentially it means is what you are, it relates back to how you can actually network, what you can do rather than geographically where you are. So you can essentially be in a remote village in let's say west of India, be far more connected and far more influential and be far more I would say progressive than be in an apartment in Mumbai and yet not be that influential. So essentially, what's a network and how you're being connected. Now we have talked about cities and the disruptive forces, but how do we actually respond to it? So when you talk about climate emergency, resilience becomes a big part. Like whether it's like ecosystems, whether it's urban ecology, and how do we actually think about buildings? How do we design open space? Sea level rise and everything else. So it's about essentially creating resilience. When you think about Generation C, right? If you're talking about being connected, how do you actually empower the next generation? Because that's the generation that would actually is living now. The future generations will be born in an era where everything is connected. So actually, how do we empower the next generation? That becomes an important part. And the cities, which will actually, again, remember, like 60% of the world's population will live in cities. How do we actually empower that? The third part is about Industry 4.0. Now, again, if technology is a way to liberate people, is a way for them to actually be more connected, more influential, and be really productive. It also begs a question about equity. Are we providing the same opportunities to everyone? Now, if you're thinking about cities will lead and nations will follow, then microeconomies, that means local economies and smaller scale businesses and entrepreneurs are equally important, because then they become the engines of propulsion, for engines of growth. And how do we actually encourage that? When you think about let's say mixed use developments, or if you think about large scale townships and stuff like that, how do we ensure that there are mechanisms to promote entrepreneurship, to promote microeconomies? The last one is, if we all believe that what you are is more important than where you are, then again, how do we actually create equity? How do we ensure that people have the same growth and prosperity that one can have, depending on, irrespective of where you are? The cities are complex entities, and we really need to use a systems thinking approach, identifying, acknowledging, and responding to the interrelationship between different aspects. For instance, systems mapping diagram shows the interrelationships that exist between different aspects, from energy efficiency, renewable energy, carbon sequestration, agriculture, to social health and environmental benefits. And one example could be, if you have a low carbon electric vehicle or active transportation, it's also connected to air pollution, carbon emissions, greenhouse gases, noise on the environmental side, while affecting the health issues such as cardiovascular diseases, respiratory issues and illnesses, or even diabetes. Now, thinking about cities and how we design cities, one has to imagine or establish these interrelationships, because you may be doing the right thing, but there are unintended circumstances or issues that you create as a response to the choices you have made. So we talked about all the different approaches. We talked about how we can create conditions of success. One big aspect of that is, what are the different concepts that we can think about? And this is not necessarily design concepts. These are, framework concepts. It's more about an approach. And this will actually help us to think about the framework and really help in, positive transformation of cities. So the first, I would say, concept that I would like to propose is, let's strive for balance, and it'll be great if it's a perfect balance. For instance, city streets. Now you look at, bicycle advocates will really fight for, the right of cyclists above the needs of pedestrians, automobiles, transit, and so on and so forth. Transit agencies will really fight for, transit lanes, of course. Vehicles, automobile, private cars will fight for, well, we need to park, we need to have, so many lanes, they'll complain about delays and congestion and so forth. Now, it's important that when you think about cities, and especially like streets, and this is an image of one of the streets in Vancouver, it's Dunsmuir, which is a major bike path, and Granville Street, which is the perpendicular one that you see on the slide. Now, it's important when you think about streets, we have to think about it as a complete streets, where everyone has a right to be in that space, whether it's a pedestrian, whether it's a bike, transit, or it's cars, but essentially really creating something that is actually equitable and accessible to all. Another concept is that of generosity. How could we think of built spaces in a public realm and programs that bring a certain level of resilience in the city? For instance, a 20-minute neighborhood that provides all the aspects for people to have a good livability. Often for architectural projects, which many of you will kind of relate to, there's a discussion about value engineering. However, there's a value in redundancy and generosity in the building for resilience. And the same is true for even for public spaces. And that's one of the concerns that designers have, is that is it value engineering or is it value elimination? The next concept I would like to talk about is embracing air and light. Looking at the vernacular, looking at energy, how do you actually create spaces that are good for health and well-being? Considering the energy requirements for buildings, recognizing that the facade plays a big role in the energy and equation, can we really learn and adapt from vernacular architecture to have different strategies for views, ventilation, access to the outside, while preserving the thermal mass and decreasing the energy load? This is also applicable to public realm. Again, how do we create thermal comfort, especially considering climate change and increased temperatures? Flexibility. Can we think about our frameworks to be flexible as gymnasts? Flexible and adaptable, enable buildings and public spaces to respond to market, social, and political forces. Another concept is that of multi-solving or multi-purpose. How can we think of design or planning moves that serve more than one purpose, multiple purposes, or solve different problems? For example, a waterfront public park with mangroves creates environmental resilience, response to sea level rise, reducing flooding. while also creating social resilience, creating equity for public access to waterfront. Another concept that I would like to propose is that of build less. Less efficient, smart, and sustainable. Now, thinking about resilience, there is a spring back effect that we can think about. Like with COVID-19, it has been really traumatic for people. But at the same time, there's a silver lining. There have been a lot of positive things that have come up through this process. It has really opened doors of opportunities. For instance, things are being manufactured locally. There's really strong supply chains that are coming up because of this urgency. People are manufacturing locally, including like face masks, face shields, and so on and so forth. People have started growing their own food, not really depending on grocery stores. Either their grocery stores are not operational, but even if they're operational, there are long queues, and even if there are long queues, many of the produce are not available. The other aspect, which is really a major issue in cities, is about homelessness. And in North America, especially, the homeless are being accommodated in hotels and vacant buildings, and which has really reduced homelessness across the city. The other thing that has come out, which is really positive, is like cities are actually reclaiming space from automobiles, right? So, cities in France and in Italy, they've already started doing this. They're saying no more cars. In fact, even in BC, certain streets are actually relegated now to only pedestrians and bikes. And city officials have realized, well, the city is functioning absolutely fine. Why should we really need to have these streets for only cars? And hence, is this an opportunity to actually make many of our streets, or at least some of it, depending on the appetite, at least for active transportation? Just a thought. This is an approach that I'm developing, and we are using it for projects within the urban design group at Perkins&Will. We call it STEM, Systems Thinking Emergence Methodology. It's a multiple stage process. We start with envisioning workshops, engagement with whether it's with community members or with clients, but essentially talking about values. The values helps us to determine certain project lenses that helps us to evolve systems thinking maps. From the different systems thinking map, we develop interdependence relationship matrix. This matrix helps us to think about really robust and flexible frameworks, and then the framework helps to be converted into a concept. Now, think about a conventional design process. You have values, and then you move into principles, and then you just jump directly into concept. I think it's important for us to, again, think about how things are connected, and therefore this whole idea about systems thinking. Now, this is the systems map that you're talking about. So again, this is from one of the projects. We started looking at what are the lenses that are there. So we looked at 8 lenses, open space, topography, context, social and shared spaces, innovative and bold, health and well-being, resilience, and microeconomies. Now, each one of them is actually connected to global forces. So from a decreasing open space to living with the land, globalized culture, disconnected communities, and so on and so forth. So for instance, when you're talking about the open space itself, we know the cities across the world are really suffering with the open space that are decreasing. So if you're thinking of this a project that you're working on, how do we actually help both at the local and at the city level and the global level, because things are interrelated. Think about topography and landscape. How do we work and live with the land? If you think about health and well-being, how do you actually make really degraded city environments more regenerative and really help in upbringing and supporting health and well-being? So from that systems mapping, we developed, this is the interdependence relationship matrix, the IRM that I talked about. So on the horizontal are lenses, and on the vertical are layers. The layers are the physical attributes that we typically think about from a planning perspective, from public realm, mobility, program, phasing, built form, parking. But when you start looking at each of these layers through these different lenses, it brings a certain amount of value and certain amount of thinking. And that's the purpose. That leads us to developing different frameworks. And these are the concepts. So each of these concepts that are actually evaluated through the 8 lenses that we develop, that gives us that kind of, I would say, confidence, clarity, and a sense of connectedness that when I talked about earlier on. The IRM, it leads to developing these flexible frameworks. Each of these frameworks are actually evaluated through the 8 lenses that we have selected for this project. Another aspect is about co-design. Now, in North America, a lot of projects, in fact, all of them, they have to go through a community engagement process. So you can't, even if you own a property, you can't really do whatever you want. You still have to have community consensus. You still need to have a kind of a say from the city you're building. We have developed different tools at Perkins&Will. The street room toolkit is what I personally designed. This is a tool that we use when you start thinking about streets. Now, streets are probably one of the largest public realm element in a city. And when you start thinking about streets, how do we actually make it really robust, flexible, equitable? The other tool that we use often is an interactive tablecloth. Essentially, it's a large print, and we use different physical and tactile objects on it. In this case, we used, this is for one of the open houses, we used program coins, like almost like wooden coins, where you could say, where do you want a cafe? Where do you want a hotel? Where do you want residential? And this is a very collaborative and co-design environment, and no idea is bad, right? So I think it's that kind of you build that kind of a common platform, a confidence, and a collective intelligence. If you think about multi-solving, and I'd spoken a little bit about multi-solving earlier. How do we actually ensure that one action or one thing that you're doing can serve multiple things? So that's one part of it. The other one is, how can the design be evaluated through multiple attributes? At Perkins&Will, we have developed multiple tools, and what you see on the top right are different ways that when you think about the built environment, from solar radiation to sunlight hours to sky view factor, views, and so on and so forth. And at the bottom, we create, this is another algorithm which actually helps to generate multiple, I would say, iterations. And after these multiple iterations are developed, you create a PCP, which is a parallel coordinate plot, that enables you to kind of evaluate different combinations. This is the parallel coordinate plot that I talked about, PCP. Essentially, these are all the different parameters that you would have discussed with the clients or internally with the design team or stakeholders. Essentially, what I'm doing now is selecting, what are those parameters and the ranges and the thresholds that we want to choose for each one of them. That helps you to select only those options that are actually providing those parameters out of the the thousands if not millions of combinations that you get through the algorithm. And then you can actually go through each of the options and choose the one that is the most relevant or the most helpful for the project. Into virtual models, we invest in rapid testing and explorations in 3D models to embrace early failures but have greater wins. It's important for us as designers to not be scared or worried about testing. I think it's important for us to kind of explore. So these are a lot of models that we have done for projects, essentially 3D printed, and which really helps us to evaluate and actually eliminate things in advance. At Perkins&Will, we have developed a huge range of tools that help us to do a performance-based design. Now, if you think about just health and wellness, the image on the right shows you a whole a gallery of all the tools that we work. The image on the left is about one of them. For example, glare point, right? So Western sun is low, so it does create glare in this part of the world. And this explores, on January 21st, for example, 9 a.m., what should the facade be, and what's the glare aspect of it. The image on the bottom is about exterior ventilation in the public realm. This is through computational fluid dynamics, a simulation, and this is a tool that is again built within Perkins&Will, where we can explore, what's the kind of pressure and what's the velocity and therefore what's the thermal comfort and just physical comfort for people in that space. This is a resilience Rely toolkit that initially developed by Perkins&Will with other partners, and it was adopted by USGBC in 2018. Now it's part of the USGBC standards, similar to LEED. I'm a Rely accredited professional, and this is something that we use quite a lot for our projects. There are multiple categories from hazard adaptation and mitigation all the way to things like community vitality, innovation and stuff like that. I may not be able to go into detail exploration and explanation about the categories, but I think I can say one thing is that unlike a LEED, which is it's got a certain kind of a prescriptive and a certain kind of scorecard, this one tends to be far more robust. It takes into account multiple standards, including LEED, Envision, well design, and sites and so on and so forth. So it's far more, I would say, holistic, and also very, very I would say strong and robust at the same time. So in summarizing, our legacy should be the stewardship of people and the planet. We have to add to our knowledge and skills with a positive attitude, confidence and humility, not arrogance, ignorance, and a sense of superiority. As designers, we can make a difference, in fact, a big one. And if we don't, we won't have another chance. So to conclude, I would say, let's create better cities, let's celebrate life, and let's evolve different frameworks for cities to become sustainable, become resilient, inclusive, and equitable. Let's rise to the occasion, and let cities rise too. Thank you.
Thank you, Architect Virendra Kallianpur, for sharing your valuable insights on panoramic approach of innovation and creativity, evaluation of disruptive forces, and diversified solutions to enhance people and the planet. Thank you once again. Friends, it is time to introduce our second speaker, architect Purvi Dalal. She is an alumna from Sir JJ College of Architecture since 1997. She is Masters in Industrial Design from Scuola Politecnico di Design, Milano, Italy. She is the Director at DesignBar Studio Private Limited, Associate Architect at Thought Projection Architects and Interior Designers. Professionally, Purvi Dalal is a practicing architect and industrial designer, having a consultancy firm as well as designing and manufacturing bespoke furniture company. But today, she is representing another interesting facet of her persona, that is her responsibility towards society. Since 2014, Purvi is also the proprietor of an organization called Health Bank, co-founded by Purvi and her sisters Alpa and Sejal. Their sole purpose behind this organization is making people aware about the inner energy and strengths that contribute towards a person's well-being. To know more about Health Bank, visit healthbank.co.in or reach out to them at healthbankthane@gmail.com. Their mission is to help people grow in their consciousness. They have Health Bank studios at Wadala and Thane. They have successfully conducted online sessions on IKIGAI during the lockdown and got extremely good testimonials from the participants. IKIGAI is your reason for being, your purpose to live and wake up each morning. Purvi will be training participants online to recognize their IKIGAI. As the current scenario demands that we learn, understand, and adapt to new challenges. Your IKIGAI could also be your second source of income, as also it can be something you love to do with nil tiredness. Over to you, Purvi.
Hello everyone, I'm Purvi Dalal. I'm an architect and an industrial designer. And before I start today's session, I want to thank you all for such an overwhelming response. Yes, it is a unique subject and I hope you all take home something very valuable today. So what exactly is IKIGAI? IKIGAI is the secret to live a satisfied and happy life. It is actually your reason for being, your life's purpose. It gives a deeper meaning to your life. And it is applicable to people from all walks of life. It is not limited to this profession or that. I think every human being on planet Earth should know their IKIGAI. So what I'm going to include in today's session is, first, I'm going to tell you all what got me attracted to my IKIGAI. Then we will talk about the secrets of success and longevity in the island of Okinawa. The third is determinants of human behavior. And lastly, do you want to find your IKIGAI? But before we get into the actual session, I would like you to answer the following questions. Now, the answers to these questions are not to be shared with me or anyone. So I suggest you be brutally honest when you reply to these questions, because these answers will be the fuel and it will help you to walk along the path of IKIGAI. So let me show you the questions. Are you passionate about your work? Do you feel that rush, that junoon when you are at work? Is there something you enjoy without tiring? So identify, do you have any activity that you really enjoy doing for hours on end without feeling any sense of tiredness? So if there is any, it could be a simple activity like organizing your wardrobe, like washing your bike, like going to site, just sitting and designing. No matter what it is, If you have one such activity, then your answer would be yes. Do you know your life's purpose? Now, by life's purpose, I don't mean if you know your goal in the next 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. No. Your life's purpose is actually the clarity of what you want to achieve in this lifetime. Are you ecstatic in life? Do you get up with this fire in your belly, with this enthusiasm each and every single morning? Does your work contribute to the society? And lastly, are you satisfied with your life? Now I will come to today's session, wherein what attracted me to my Ikigai. So after 21 years of practice, somewhere I started feeling like I am on a plateau and things are not going up like the way I want them to. So after introspection, I decided that I should now take time off and live my dream and study in a European university. So I took off lock, stock and barrel to Italy and to do my master's in industrial design. Now, most of you know that education or studying is the best time of your life. Those who are studying right now, remember, you are in the best part of your life. So as I was studying, there was no stress of running an organization. There was no worrying about the numbers, about getting new projects, about networking. It was such a stress-free zone. I began to enjoy that part of my life. I was actually in the mecca of design. I was exposed to design continuously, and I was in the fashion capital of the world. So I couldn't be asking for anything more. And when there is a student's life, there is also a lot of partying. So I was really balancing between these two and having a great time. But again, after 2 years, I started questioning as to the shallowness of all this. Something was gnawing at me and I couldn't place my finger. Then I happened to come to Mumbai for a short vacation. And while these questions were going on in my head, I just enrolled into this course, which was a school of success and happiness. So I said, okay, maybe there's something I need to learn over here. This is where I met my mentor, Dr. Premji Nirmal, and his wife, Bharti Nirmal. They were both successful electronic engineers and they also moved to their Ikigai. So I did one short course and then started thinking. I went back to Italy, packed up and came back to my Karma Bhumi. Here, I started doing more courses on what exactly takes me to my success, to my happiness. After a few years, I decided to train other people to take them towards their success and happiness. So what I learned was that just enjoying or just loving my design or being good at design is not good enough. I need to take my designs to a larger audience, or I need to make my designs useful for the society and at the same time be paid for that. So that completed my jigsaw puzzle of my Ikigai. So design is my first Ikigai. Now I will move on to the second part of the story, which tells you what happens when you know your Ikigai. So this is the island of Okinawa in Japan, and there is a book written by Dan Butner, who is a reporter with National Geographic. So he studied 5 zones all over the world, and these zones have the longest living centenarians. Also, his study revealed that these people, they are living a very healthy life with minimum illnesses. They don't succumb to the illnesses that we go through in our city life. And what these centenarians were enjoying is vitality, a health till the end of their life. Also, their blood tests revealed fewer free radicals. What does this mean is that if there are fewer free radicals, these radicals are responsible for your cellular aging. So if your cells are not aging, neither are you. Then women saw long reproductive life. Also, their rate of dementia is well below the global average, and the word retire does not exist in their dictionaries. So this island of Okinawa is also called as the island of eternal youth because they know the art of staying young while growing old. They already know their ikigai, which brings them satisfaction, happiness, meaning to their lives because they know the reason for their existence and they do not retire. So these Japanese people, they keep doing what they love for as long as their health allows. Also, they are healthy till the very end of their lives. What is the formula that these guys are living by? The first one is connections. So they have built these groups of common interests, and these people in a single group, they keep looking after one another. So their decisions, their life is revolving around the community and not just around themselves. Also, they're following a modified diet. These are mostly plant-based diets because they have learned that eating meat is actually heavier for the digestive system. So they practically have no meat at all, only vegetarian and plant-based diet. They know their clear purpose, their reason for being. Also, they have a sense of unlimited time. Most of us in the city, we have limited time, limited energy, limited resources. But the way these guys are living, their eyes are not constantly on the clock. And this gives them a sense of unlimited time. Also, they are moving naturally, meaning they are called as a walkable community. So they do a lot of their work on foot. They do a lot of gardening. They complete their daily chores with a lot of love and enthusiasm. And they know and live their ikigai. So now I'm coming to the third part, which is the determinants of human behavior. So you know what happens when you have your ikigai, you are naturally moving towards a long life. But what are the reasons which can keep you away from knowing ikigai? So I'm going to present a study by Dr. David Hawkins. He's written this book called Power versus Force. It's a beautiful book and it describes the different human emotions, and he's made a whole map of these emotions. Let me show you the map. So this map, it shows different emotions. So if these emotions have a value, if you're vibrating, if you're experiencing shame throughout the day, if that is your predominant emotion, then you are vibrating at a frequency of 10 raised to 20 hertz. So to make it easier, you're vibrating at the frequency of 20. It's a lower frequency. Now, what you have to do is you have to find out what is that one emotion which is predominant throughout your day. And the easiest way to do this is keep a thought diary. Keep noting down what is it that is predominant. What are you entertaining? What are you energizing? What is that one emotion? It could be 2, 3, 4 emotions, but mostly you will keep moving between that same pattern of emotions. So let's say somebody might be an angry person, and such a person will keep having thoughts of anger, will keep having outbursts. Then you are vibrating at a frequency of 150 hertz. Again, remember, this is a logarithmic scale and the frequency is actually 10 raised to 150. If you're experiencing pride throughout the day, I'm this, I'm that, if you're experiencing these kind of thoughts, you're vibrating at the frequency of 175. Now, what happens when you're vibrating below 250? Let me show you the next picture. When you're vibrating at the lower frequencies, that is from shame to pride, you're vibrating between 20 to 175, then you are governed by a force. Now, this force is so heavy on you that you can't seem to get out of those situations, or you can't seem to have the energy to attract better things in life. So you will keep moving about in those same events, similar kind of people, similar kind of situations. But in our Ikigai workshop, we actually show participants how they can move up from these lower frequencies and start vibrating at the higher frequencies. The higher emotions are courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and enlightenment. So the minute you start coming out of the clutches of force, automatically you get pulled towards the zone which is called power. Now in power, if you look at the emotions, these are higher emotions, and these can easily make you a magnet of attracting higher situations, attracting higher people, higher opportunities. So for you to come to that higher zone, we will actually show you different ways to pull yourself out of this zone of force and move up, because your Ikigai is in the area of power. All right. Now, there are 3 reasons what could or could not take you towards your longevity, to increase your lifespan. If you're in the zone of force, as I said, you will mostly be having health-related issues or wealth-related issues, or you might be having issues in your relationships. But if you are not pulled down by any of these, then naturally you will live much, much longer, because you don't have any reason to succumb to the death urge. That death urge, that's a lower emotion, and that is what can pull you into the area of force. So for you to live longer, for you to live healthier, for you to have a increased lifespan, you have to move to that area of power. And when you know your Ikigai, when you know your purpose, you have so much clarity that you will start moving towards your purpose, and longevity is just a byproduct of that Ikigai. Also, I come to you have to know your life purpose. So if you're vibrating at a higher frequency, you will naturally get attracted to your life's purpose. You will start moving to the zone ecstasy. If you look at successful people, you will observe that their strongest point is that they have complete clarity. they are not wasting their time and energy in ifs and buts. They have their passion clear, they have their mission clear, and their vocation is in line with their profession. So here I come to almost the end of my session. This is the map or the formula of Ikigai. So Ikigai lies at the intersection of 4 circles, and these circles are love, talent, money, and usefulness. Now, what is love? What do you love doing? Let's say, for example, if I love designing, I enjoy designing, then design becomes what I love. If I'm very good at designing, then my talent is also design. Now, the intersection of love and talent is my passion. The intersection of talent and money. Money is what the society or what I'm getting paid for is what is money. So the intersection of talent and money is your profession, and the intersection of money and usefulness. Usefulness is what the society needs. So when you're designing something, is it a need of the society? The minute you come to that question, you will get your vocation. Because like the way when I was describing my story, I realized that if I'm not designing for the society, if I'm unable to do that, then somewhere I don't have my life's purpose. So the intersection of the usefulness and what people are willing to pay you for, that is money, is vocation, and the intersection of love and usefulness is your mission. So your Ikigai is the intersection of your passion, your mission, your profession, and your vocation. Why should you find your Ikigai? Because Ikigai will give you a reason to wake up each morning with full enthusiasm. It will give you the reason for your existence. It will give you a direction to move towards your vocation, because that's one thing that most of us may not be thinking about. What is the need of the society? So if you're able to manage all these factors, then you can easily come to your Ikigai. I hope you all really enjoyed this session.
Amidst this pandemic situation, it was surely an interesting session, Purvi. Hope we are able to find our Ikigai. Thank you. Thank you, speakers, for the incredible knowledge share. Thank you, viewers, for the active participation and enthusiasm. Thank you, AAJJA and iDAC, for the opportunity to learn. It's now time to take up the activities at hand at home. Stay curious to participate in many more knowledge track sessions soon to come your way. Stay safe, take care. Friends, it's time to address your questions. Please type your questions in the chat box.
Hey, everyone.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, thank you very much for your time. And we have kept you awake since 5 a.m. in the morning at Vancouver.
That's the,
But
that's
I
fine.
have received a few curious questions from the audience on chat and otherwise. I would straight away go to the questions without taking much time.
Sure.
Do you think,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, please say.
No, I just wanted to thank AAJJA for organizing the talks. It was wonderful to meet fellow JJites, and yeah, keep going. This is a great way to kind of share knowledge, and also, during these tough situations, I think it's a great opportunity to be in touch with friends and colleagues.
We at AAJJA are also very happy to have you here and share your knowledge, and we are glad that you did, and we are hoping that you share more of your knowledge with us in future.
My pleasure.
Should I go ahead with the questions?
Absolutely.
Do you think Indian cities can get closer to net zero cities by 2030? Any critical must-to-do action plan by the government?
A great question, and I think this is something that cities all around the world are grappling with. I would say policies, best practices, implementation, and governance. These four aspects are pretty important. We could really have very strong visions, but a strong governance structure that includes jurisdiction, implementation, and incentives. They must be developed, right? Otherwise, these visions will not see the day of light. And not saying that net zero and cities being by 2030, but I think this is true with any kind of vision, and I think this is like right up on the ladder of aspirations and the ladder of what we really need to do. So I would say it's not necessarily a technological challenge, but I think it's more a social behavior change and challenge.
Okay, in continuation with this question, Hamir Smart had asked one question regarding how do you relate mentality of people living in city with city planning?
Yeah, so just to kind of get a clarity on that, I understand that it's about people's acceptance of city planning. So I'll address based on that premise. And if the question is not answered accurately, please let me know. So I think it's again a question of social behavior change, right? So a large part of city planning is about engagement and policy, right? So if it's mandated that projects need to have community engagement, people will start appreciating the power of planning. So otherwise, it just becomes like a paper tiger, right? You don't have legs beyond what you've drawn or what you're envisioned. So if those things really need to get implemented as part of the city planning process, then people need to know the importance of that. And I would say a big part of that is about knowledge sharing. And what I personally like to say, it's collective intelligence, right? So like, how do you actually bring everyone's intelligence at the same level so that anything that you say is not necessarily a noise, but it's about acceptance and thinking about how cities can evolve in the future. So I would say uh, uh, the kind of solution lies in social behavioral change.
He has questioned how are cities with high density similar to India coping what are the alternatives which the world is adopting to make sure jobs are not lost?
Yeah, I think the big difference between cities like in North America and Europe and India is human resources cost, right? So and believe me, these are things that are being discussed even in cities across the world and in North America, even in Vancouver. I would say again, this needs to be handled through policies. It's a disruptive force, right? So we know that autonomous vehicles will come. It's a matter of time, and how prepared cities are. So there are ripples that are kind of felt everywhere. So I think the need there's a need to balance the opportunity cost. So for example, there can be limitations imposed on certain areas where, taxis may be more relevant. There may be limitations on times in terms of for AV vehicles in cities. One can also imagine limitations on cost of kilometers, right? Like a travel to incentivize cab companies to offer cheaper services. And I think the last, I would say, is just a difference between fleet operation and individual ownership, right? How do cab companies really work? In many cities, it's part of a larger fleet. So, there are a certain amount of resilience within that. But if it's an individual proprietary business, then it's a different thing. So, again, it goes back to, I would say, entrepreneurship. It's about, microeconomies that I talked about. And I think it's not dissimilar from that. How do you actually encourage technological companies, MNCs and everything to work at the same time, help local shops to work. So in the same vein of thought, I would say it's really about policies. How do you actually protect them, and so that the jobs are not lost? The reality is the world that we live in, technology is playing a big part and actually will play a larger part. So it's also about how you leverage it. And it's, in many ways, it reminds me of the situation between Kodak and, what happened to Kodak as a company, right? It got wiped out because they didn't kind of evolve. So again, it's about evolution. So even cab companies, taxi companies, they need to kind of evolve and be I would say be adept at developing the technology and embracing it. So for example, even there is no thing about adopting AVs as part of your fleet, as long as you kind of know how you balance between human resources cost and your operational costs and so on and so forth. So no silver bullets as such, but I think this is something that cities across the world are trying to figure out.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. There was one question from Parish Kapse. He's asking, have you come across any Indian cities or clients or developers at least thinking on the lines of Neom City in Saudi Arabia?
I think a great question. I wouldn't say not necessarily at the scale of Neom. I think it's really huge. We personally, we are working on not the Vancouver studio, but Perkins&Will in large. We are working on the whole planning for this Kuwait, the whole country, and you're looking at extremely different scenarios. But that's not. I would say the scale is probably the same, but the approach is very different, right? So in this case, in Neom, it's a green field, it's a new thing. The kind of technologies they're thinking about is right from like artificial moon, like you can't even imagine, what that means. But more than that, I think I would say I personally I'm not aware of projects specifically in the Indian scene. Probably like 10 or 15 years back, when I was doing a lot of township developments in India, there was a lot of talk about adopting and integrating technologies. Of course, at that point in time, just like I'm talking about 10, 15 years back, the technology was different. But I think the ability or the acceptance and the appetite to kind of integrate technology is not dissimilar from places like the Neom or Sidewalk Labs Quayside. I think it's more, I would say, the vision or the aspiration and the appetite to kind of do something that is not done before. So it's like uncharted territories in many ways.
True. There's one more question, which actually Prathamesh has asked. Is there any place one could read more about the street room tool that you have developed?
Yeah, a great question, Prathamesh. Unfortunately, there is no literature out there. I'm rather still working on a white paper. I can share once that's developed with you. So if you could share your email with Aja, I could connect it back with you. And at the same time, feel free to reach out to me. I can maybe have a conversation with you and tell what the tool is all about. So I don't think this is the end. I think this is like a beginning of a good discourse and discussion moving forward. So feel free to reach out to me, and I can share whatever information that I have.
Absolutely. I hope Prathamesh gets back to us, and he shall, and we will connect him with you for sure. There's one question very interesting with all the developments in the technology and all. Some curiosity here. Advanced modeling software used by leading architects are customized, or they have a proprietary, or they are higher versions of normally available softwares. Which software does Perkins use, and for what kind of detailing and modeling? We would want to know more about that.
Okay, great. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think big, larger companies invest quite a lot in developing different tools and stuff like that. A part of the tool is also softwares, right? There are other tools that companies do. At Perkins&Will, I would say like off the box, like just we use standard modeling softwares like Revit, Rhino, SketchUp, and so on and so forth. But within the urban design group and the planning group that I lead, and within the overall Perkins&Will workforce, we typically use Rhino as the base modeling software, but then we really leverage the abilities that Grasshopper provides. So while we have certain I would say tools that are already available, or so rather the scripts that are already available in Grasshopper, we tend to actually kind of write and develop more tools. The tools could be about mobility, it could be about energy, it could be about even morphology and trying to understand what do cities mean, what's the reading of it, understanding views, vistas, and all that. I would say we tend to at least start with what's the intent for the tool, not necessarily the tool, and develop it. So for all the projects that we do, we try to have a research question or things that we want to solve as part of the project, and that helps us to kind of develop different tools. So as we go along, there is an investment in time and efforts and stuff like that. We develop a whole range of proprietary tools. So I would say it's kind of a combination. There are industrial tools or industrial softwares we use, but at the same time, we have a huge amount of tools that get developed. And many times, just similar to what I mentioned in the presentation, I think we believe in trial and error, right? So we develop a tool, adapt it, and use it for a project, and we realize, oh well, this is these are the limitations. Like my urban designer will say, like this actually I really can't use because it doesn't do this for me, and that goes back to, so we have like 7 research labs within Perkins&Will. So it goes back to different research labs depending on what solutions are there, and we kind of work on it and refine it as we go. So some of the tools that I showed you today have been developed over a period of time. Some of them are pretty, I would say, simple and easy to use. Well, some of them are really complicated and has, again, evolved over a period of time.
Yeah. Just a last question. I'm very curious to know, like, if in case you want to give certain message for the aspiring architects and urban designers of the country, what would that be? If they are envisioning to get out of their comfort zone and wanting to do something like amazing you are doing, what would be your message for them?
I would say to what Purvi said, you find your ikigai. I would literally just print out the last Venn diagram that Purvi had, and just keep it in a place that you can always look at. Um, in terms of like pure design, and this comes from like in a very, very honest and humble and I would say sincere way. I think it's passion, right? I mean, the field we are in, like I wouldn't kid. I think it's not necessarily like the highest paying, or you're not making. I think what keeps us going is the passion and deep commitment. I would say the second thing is probably is perseverance. When you're thinking about out of the box, like some of the times that we explore things, we just can't afford to give up, right? I mean, it's about perseverance. I would say a combination of a really deep passion to what you're doing and perseverance can go a long way.
That excites me to ask you another question.
this is
Sure.
the last question now. Like
Absolutely,
Purvi
no problem.
said, it is a secret that everybody's Ikigai must be a secret if they want to keep it as a secret. But I would want to ask you, what is your Ikigai?
Oh, very heavy indeed. Um, I would say probably like I really need to kind of have a little bit of introspection after Purvi's very inspiring talk. I would say I think it's probably just like Purvi said, it's an intersection of different things, and I would say the reason that I'm in this field for the last like 24 years is because I love design. And when I mean design, is design in different ways. I'm really passionate about cities, about architecture, and built environment. At the same time, I'm like super curious and interested in industrial design. I do a lot of I'm really fond of art, music. So it's about, I think, creativity and design. At least in my case, I feel that's my Ikigai. The second part is, I would say, compassion. Because I think the world we live in, I think people need to be compassionate to fellow people. So I think finding your Ikigai is probably a process, and something that like Purvi can really help all of us. But at the same time, I feel there is a serious amount of introspection and recalibration as we go through different stages of our life, and I think keeping that continuous.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and this wonderful presentation that you did, and helping us with our questions as well. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Take care and stay
Thank you.
connected. Yeah.
Great. Absolutely. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.